Okay, so you guys sent us a ton of stuff about minimalism,
Yeah,
and we're ready to dig in.
a whole stack of sources.
Yeah, it looks like an article with some, like, 10 steps to get started with minimalism.
Practical steps.
Then someone kind of diving deeper into the different ways minimalism can be a lifestyle.
Right, and even its environmental impact, which is
yeah.
fascinating.
And then, of course, the Merriam-Webster definition, just
The classic.
the classic. And Wikipedia, which is like, the ultimate overview of, like, minimalism in art and in design and, like, basically in life.
I mean, they go deep
Yeah.
on Wikipedia. It's impressive.
It is, and we even have a, like, synthesized OpenStax, like, definition.
Well, nice. Yeah, a good concise one to anchor us.
Yeah, so we're going to try to pull out the most interesting stuff and give you a sense of what minimalism is all about. And you mentioned that you're interested in, like, gaining knowledge effectively without getting overwhelmed. So maybe this
Right, maybe there's some overlap.
Yeah, maybe this will be perfect.
I think so.
Yeah, you've been feeling that, like, pressure of, like, too much stuff, too many choices.
Just so much input all the time.
Yeah, like, how do we deal with all this?
Information overload, for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's see what minimalism has to say about it.
Sounds good to me.
I'm ready.
Okay, so I think it's really striking when you look at all this material, just how many different things minimalism can mean.
Yeah, it's really broad.
It is.
But I think that OpenStax definition that you mentioned is a good place to start because it gives us that core idea.
Okay.
Extreme simplicity, right? Like getting rid of all that extra stuff, the ornamentation.
And Haim really stricken it down.
Yeah, to the bare bones.
Yeah. And that seems to connect with everything else that we see. It does. It kind of ripples out.
Yeah. And Merriam-Webster adds to that by, giving us a sense of, like, different ways to think about a minimalist.
Right. It's not just one thing.
So it's the person, right? Like the person who tries to keep things simple.
Yeah, like someone who's really intentional about simplifying their life.
Uh-huh. And then it's also like the artist, the one making the art,
Oh, right. Yeah, that minimalist aesthetic.
And then even just like someone who follows those principles.
And a minimalist lifestyle.
Yeah, so it could be like a way of thinking or a way of making things or just like a way of being.
That's a good way to put it.
That's really cool.
It is. And you know what's interesting is that Merriam-Webster also gives us the history of the word.
Oh, yeah, I saw.
Like when it first popped up.
It was a while ago, right?
Yeah, way back in 1906 as a noun, and then in 1929 as an adjective.
So it's not just some, trendy new thing.
No, it's got some history.
Yeah.
And Wikipedia really digs into that history, particularly in the art world. They place minimalism as this major movement in art after World War II.
Oh, okay.
And in a lot of ways, it was like a pushback against all those big expressive styles like abstract expressionism and modernism.
Okay, so like a reaction to what came before.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that they talk about how minimalism shifted the focus to the object itself, like how the viewer experiences the art directly without the artist getting in the way so much.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like they were trying to strip away the artist's voice and just let the object speak for itself.
So instead of the artist kind of like telling you what to think about the art,
right,
you're just experiencing it more directly.
Exactly. And that's where I think the connection to minimalism as a lifestyle starts to emerge.
Okay.
Like paring things back to the essentials.
Right. Focusing on what really matters.
Exactly.
So it's this really like kind of philosophical idea.
Yeah. It's deep.
But then you have Courtney Carver's article, which is called Beginner Minimalist.
Right.
And she gives you these like 10 steps to actually, start living in a more minimalist way.
Yeah, super practical.
Yeah, and she calls them tiny steps.
I like that.
Yeah, it makes it feel a lot less intimidating.
Right.
But she makes this really interesting point that, like, it's not just about getting rid of stuff.
Yeah.
It's more about, like, an internal shift,
Well, absolutely. It's a mindset thing.
Yeah. And I think that connects with what you were talking about with, like, learning new things.
Right.
It's not about, like, just taking in more information.
No, it's about focusing on the things that really matter.
Yeah, like, what are the core ideas?
Yeah, what are the key takeaways that you can actually use, build on?
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Me too.
So her first step is to write down why you want to simplify your life.
Oh, that's so important.
Yeah, and she gives some examples like getting out of debt or spending more time with family.
Right. Or even like reducing stress.
Yeah. Like what are the things that are really motivating you?
Exactly. And I think from a psychological perspective, that's huge.
Okay.
Because when you understand your motivations, you're more likely to stick with any kind of change.
Right. So if you just try to become a minimalist because it's like trendy.
Yeah, or, someone told you to.
Yeah.
It's probably not going to last.
Yeah. But if you have those really deep reasons,
Uh-huh.
then you're more likely to actually follow through.
You've got that intrinsic motivation.
Exactly.
That's what keeps you going.
And so you hit that rough patch and you're like, why am I even doing this?
Yeah.
You could look back at your list and be like, oh, right, this is why.
It brings you back to center.
Exactly.
That's so smart.
Okay, so then she moves into some really practical tips.
Okay. Like what?
Like discard the duplicates you never use.
Oh, yeah, we all have those.
And she has this great method, the 30-day box method.
What's that?
You basically take all the stuff that you're not sure about
Uh-huh.
and you put it in a box for 30 days.
Okay.
And if you don't need it or even remember that it's in there,
Right.
then you get rid of it.
That's brilliant.
Isn't it?
Yeah, because it takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
You're not like making this huge decision right away.
Ah.
You're just giving yourself some time and space to see if you actually miss those items.
And I love that she also talks about creating a clutter-free zone.
Oh, yeah, even if it's just a small space.
Yeah, like a drawer or a corner of a room, just to kind of like have that visual reminder of what it feels like to have less stuff.
It's like a little oasis of calm.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you can start to expand from there.
And it's not just about physical clutter.
Right.
She has this great step, which is call someone you haven't talked to in a while.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's a reminder that like mental clutter can be just as draining.
Totally. Like those unresolved conversations or lingering connections.
Yeah, it can really weigh on you.
And taking that step to reconnect can actually free up some mental space.
Yeah, I thought that was really insightful.
It's about simplifying all aspects of your life.
Yeah. And then she uses travel as an example.
Oh, how so?
She suggests packing for like half the time that you're actually going to be gone
Oh, interesting.
and see what you can live without.
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah, and it's a way to kind of like experience that feeling of lightness.
Right, and really see what's essential.
Yeah, what do you actually need versus what are you just used to bringing?
That's a great exercise.
Yeah, and I think it connects to that idea of the capsule wardrobe.
Right, like Project 333, where you choose just 33 items of clothing.
Yeah, for 3 months.
It's a great way to experiment with simplicity without making a huge commitment.
Yeah, and it can help you realize how much of your wardrobe is actually redundant.
Right, and how much time and energy we waste just deciding what to wear.
It's so true.
So many decisions every day.
I know, and that leads perfectly into her next step.
What's that?
Eat similar meals for less decision fatigue.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
I know it sounds almost too simple, but when you think about how many decisions we make,
Every single day.
yeah, just like even what to have for breakfast can be like a big decision.
Totally.
So if you can streamline some of those routines,
Right.
you free up your brain for other things.
I love that.
Okay, so then step 8 is about caring a little less about what other people think.
Oh, that's a tough one.
I know, but it's so powerful
It is.
because it's about like really focusing on your own values
Mhm.
and what matters to you instead of like trying to please everyone else.
Yeah, it's about finding your own path
Exactly.
and being true to yourself.
And then she talks about finances,
Okay.
like building a small emergency fund.
That's always a good idea.
Yeah. Even having like $1,000 set aside
Uh-huh.
can make a huge difference.
Just knowing you have that cushion can really reduce stress.
Yeah. And finally, her last step is do less.
That's a good one.
I know it's like so counter to everything that we're told,
Right, we're supposed to be productive and busy all the time.
but she's saying like, actually, it's really important to rest.
Yeah, to say no to things.
Yeah. To create space for yourself.
To avoid burnout.
Exactly.
I love that.
So minimalism isn't just about subtracting things.
Yeah.
It's about making room for what really matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like your values, your well-being.
your passions.
Exactly.
No, I think Angela G. Horn's piece really builds on this.
Okay.
She talks about choosing your minimalist path, and she describes how minimalism has evolved from just an aesthetic and design
Right.
to this broader movement about living intentionally.
Yeah, like a whole way of life.
Exactly. And she breaks it down into 3 main categories.
Okay.
So first, you've got traditional minimalism,
Okay.
which is what a lot of people probably picture when they think of minimalism.
Right, like decluttering your home, owning less stuff.
Yeah, and focusing on quality over quantity.
Uh-huh. And she talks about the benefits like having more mental clarity
Right, and being less stressed.
and sometimes even like saving money.
Yeah.
But she also points out that there can be challenges.
Like what?
Like letting go of things can be really hard for some people.
Emotionally? Yeah.
And sometimes people around you might not understand.
Right, they might think you're being weird.
Yeah.
So it's not always easy.
No.
Then she talks about extreme minimalism.
Okay, so like taking it to the next level.
Yeah, people who own like very few possessions.
Like how few are we talking?
Sometimes under 100 items. Yeah, and they might even live with very little or no furniture.
Okay.
And for them, the appeal is that freedom from material attachments.
Great, like a sense of detachment.
And potentially a very low environmental impact.
That's interesting.
Although she does point out that if you're traveling a lot,
Right.
that can offset those benefits.
That makes sense.
And there can be downsides to this approach, too.
Like what?
You know, social isolation, or even turning minimalism into a competition.
Yep.
Like who can own the least amount of stuff.
So it's about finding that balance.
Right.
Okay, so what's the third category?
Rational minimalism.
Okay,
She calls it the Goldilocks approach.
I like that.
Yeah, it's about finding that sweet spot.
Okay.
It's still about being mindful and intentional,
Huh.
but it's more flexible.
Okay.
You can keep sentimental items or things that you might need just in case.
Okay.
It's about making conscious choices
Right.
based on your values and your needs.
And not just following some strict set of rules.
Exactly. And she says this approach can lead to less stress without sacrificing comfort.
Uh-huh.
And you can still be more sustainable without feeling deprived.
So it's more like a personalized approach.
Yeah, it's about finding what works for you.
I like that.
Me too.
Now, speaking of like finding what works for you,
Yeah.
Angela also talks about the connection between minimalism and the environment.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. And I think it's something that a lot of people are thinking about these days.
With climate change and all the environmental challenges we're facing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So how does minimalism tie into that?
Well, when we own less stuff, we buy less stuff.
Right.
Which means there's less demand for new products.
Okay.
And that reduces the strain on the planet's resources.
So less mining, less deforestation.
Exactly.
And less energy being used to make and transport things.
Right. And she emphasizes mindful consumption.
What does that mean?
It's about really thinking about what you're buying.
Okay.
Choosing quality over quantity. And prioritizing experiences over things.
Yeah. So instead of buying a new gadget,
Right.
you might spend that money on a trip or a concert.
Exactly. Something that creates memories.
Yeah. And she uses the capsule wardrobe as an example
Oh, yeah.
of how reducing your clothes can have a positive impact on the environment.
Right. Think about all the resources that go into making clothes.
Yeah, the water, the energy, the transportation.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And minimalism can help reduce that.
And then there's the whole issue of waste.
Yeah.
When you buy less, you create less packaging waste.
Right.
And when you focus on quality, your things last longer.
Uh-huh.
So you're not throwing things away as often.
And you might be more likely to repair things instead of replacing them.
Right.
Which is great for the environment.
So basically, minimalism can be a way to live more sustainably.
Absolutely.
And if enough people do it,
Yeah.
it could have a real impact.
It could lead to lower carbon emissions and a more sustainable economic model.
So it's not just about, having a tidy house. It's about something much bigger.
It's about taking care of the planet.
Exactly.
Now, Wikipedia takes us even deeper.
Okay.
They show how minimalism has influenced all sorts of fields.
Like what?
Well, they start with visual art,
Great.
and they explain that minimalism in art emerged in the early 1960s in New York
Okay.
as a reaction against abstract expressionism.
So again, like a response to what came before.
Exactly. And these minimalist artists like Donald Judd, Agnes Martin, Dan Flavin,
Okay.
they wanted to create art that was self-referential.
Meaning what?
Meaning that the art was just about itself.
Oh.
It wasn't trying to represent something else.
Interesting.
Yeah, they use simple geometric forms, industrial materials, and a lot of repetition to emphasize the physical presence of the artwork.
Okay, so like the viewer is really experiencing the materials and the form.
Exactly. And the critic, Michael Fried, called this literalism
Okay.
because it was about the object as it is.
Right. No hidden meanings or symbolism. And how does that translate to other areas?
Well, in design and architecture,
Okay.
minimalism is all about using negative space.
Like empty space?
Yeah, and neutral colors. And getting rid of any unnecessary decoration.
So really focusing on the essential elements.
Exactly. And there's that famous saying, less is more.
Oh, yeah, by Mies van der Rohe.
He was a big proponent of minimalist architecture.
And Wikipedia mentions the influence of Japanese design and Zen philosophy.
Oh, yeah, like the concept of ma.
What's that?
It's the power of empty space.
Okay.
And wabi-sabi, which is about finding beauty in imperfection and simplicity.
Interesting.
And they give examples of contemporary architects like Tadao Ando and Kazuo Sejima, who are known for their minimalist designs.
But they also point out that there's a difference between like pure minimalism
Right.
and what they call contemporary minimalism.
Yeah, contemporary minimalism might use more decoration or warmer colors.
Okay, so it's like a softer version.
Yeah, exactly.
And then what about literature?
Well, Wikipedia describes minimalist literature as using very few words,
Okay.
focusing on surface descriptions, and letting the reader fill in the gaps.
Interesting. So it's almost like the opposite of those really dense novels
Right.
where the author's telling you everything.
Exactly. In minimalist literature, the reader has to do more work.
Okay. And they give examples like Ernest Hemingway and Raymond Carver.
Right. Their writing is very sparse and impactful.
And they even mention this essay called Ornament and Crime.
Oh, yeah, by Adolf Loos. He was an architect, and he argued against ornamentation.
Interesting.
He thought it was a waste of time and resources.
Okay.
So he was definitely a minimalist at heart.
That's cool.
And minimalism shows up in music, too.
Oh, yeah. How so?
It's characterized by repetition and gradual variations.
Okay.
Think of composers like Lamonti Young or Philip Glass.
Okay.
Their music can be very hypnotic and trance-inducing.
Interesting.
And there's this early example of minimalist music called Monotone Symphony.
What's that?
It was composed by Yves Klein. Okay.
And it's literally just one note played for 20 minutes, followed by 20 minutes of silence.
Wow, that's minimal.
It is.
What about film?
Well, directors like Robert Bresson and Yasujiro Ozu are often associated with minimalism.
Okay.
They use simple stories, straightforward camera work, and minimal music.
So it's about creating a very specific mood or atmosphere.
It's about letting the images and the performances speak for themselves.
I like that.
And Wikipedia goes on to list other areas where minimalism has had an impact.
Okay, like what?
Well, they mentioned Nouvelle cuisine.
Oh, yeah. The fancy French cooking.
Right. It's all about simple, elegant dishes, focusing on high-quality ingredients.
Okay.
And then there's the capsule wardrobe in fashion.
Which we already talked about.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see how this idea pops up in so many different areas.
Right. Minimalism is everywhere.
Even in science communication.
Oh, yeah, like the warming stripes.
What are those?
They were created by a scientist named Ed Hawkins,
Okay.
and they're a way to visualize global warming.
It's just a series of colored stripes.
Mm-hmm.
Each stripe represents a year,
Okay.
and the color shows the average temperature for that year.
So it's a very simple but powerful way to show the data.
Exactly.
And then, of course, there's the whole minimalist lifestyle,
Right.
which we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Focusing on owning less stuff
Yeah.
and prioritizing experiences.
And living more intentionally.
Exactly.
So it's clear that minimalism has a lot to offer.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating concept.
It is.
And so bringing it back to Angela's piece,
Yeah.
how do we actually figure out our own minimalist path?
Well, she says it starts with self-reflection.
Okay.
Like really thinking about your values and your needs.
Uh-huh.
What's important to
What
you.
brings you joy?
Exactly. And what are your long-term goals?
So it's not just about decluttering your stuff.
Right.
It's about figuring out what you want your life to look like.
Exactly. And then you can start to make choices that align with that vision.
And she says to take a look at your current habits. Like, where is clutter holding you back?
Right. Whether it's physical clutter or mental clutter.
Yeah, like too many commitments or too much information.
It's about identifying those areas where minimalism could make a positive difference.
And she says to start small.
Yeah, don't try to do everything at once.
Right. Like maybe just tackle one drawer or one closet.
Exactly. And focus on mindful consumption.
So really think before you buy something.
Yeah, do you really need it?
Does it align with your values?
Right.
And she also says to reassess regularly.
Yeah, because your needs and your values might change over time.
So it's not about like finding the perfect minimalist solution
Yeah.
and then sticking with it forever.
It's about being flexible and adapting as you go.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a journey.
So to wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
we've learned that minimalism is about so much more than just getting rid of stuff.
It's about intentionality.
Right.
About prioritizing what matters.
And reducing excess in all its forms.
Yeah, whether it's physical clutter or mental clutter or even artistic ornamentation.
And it can have all sorts of benefits.
Like less stress, more time for what you love.
And a lower impact on the environment.
Exactly.
And connecting this back to your interest in learning,
Yeah.
minimalism can actually be a really useful framework.
How so?
Well, it's about focusing on the essential information,
Right.
cutting through the noise.
And finding those core ideas.
Yeah, so you can learn more effectively without getting overwhelmed.
That makes sense.
So here's a final thought for you.
Okay.
Minimalism is all around us.
Yeah, in art, in design, in our homes, in our lives.
So how can you apply this less is more philosophy to your own experiences?
Yeah. What would it look like to simplify different aspects of your life?
Maybe this deep dive has just sparked your curiosity,
I hope so.
and you can start exploring the power of living with less.
I think that's a great place to leave it.
Me too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was fun.
Yeah, and until next time, keep it minimal.
Or don't.
Or don't. Whatever works for you.
That's the beauty of it.
Exactly.